Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the internet at MichaelDukesShow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or translator. Good morning. How are you? It is the Michael Dukes Show. It is the Thursday edition of the program, and we are ready to go. We're ready. We're locked and loaded. We're locked and loaded for today. We got a big show lined up for you. And we are, I'm pretty excited about it, quite honestly. It's going to be a good discussion, I think, anyway, as we go through this morning. So today, we're going to hit on a couple of headlines that are kind of eye-opening. And then we're going to dive into it with Ben Carpenter, Representative Ben Carpenter, from down there on the peninsula, and we're going to talk with him about his comments during the presser on Monday, which were I think very interesting because again it shows a confidence and also maybe a little bit of a strategy here to how and try to deal. Let me start this again. To try and deal with and how to deal with the PFD in the future. And I think that's going to be a good discussion with Ben Carpenter. Then in hour 2, we're going to talk with Representative Julie, I'm going to butcher this, Coulombe. And we're going to talk with her about the latest budget that she has put out as the chair of the Department of Education and Early Development Committee. And specifically, I want to talk to her about these ghost positions, because as we reported yesterday, her committee eliminated a couple positions. And what struck me about those, about that position, cutting that part of the budget, was that she said that she said that these two positions, it was $400,000 for 2 librarians at the state library in Juneau. And she said she likes libraries, but those positions have been vacant for years. And that just really struck a chord with me, because we've talked about this in the past. These what we were calling ghost positions. Essentially, they were funded but not filled. And many of them have been unfilled for years, yet the money still goes to the department in that amount, and it becomes kind of this quasi slush fund that they can do things with. Even it's crazy. It's crazy. So we're going to talk with Julie Coulombe about that here in hour 2 on the program, and we'll see what she has to say. And we haven't visited with her. She's a brand new legislator. I went back and I don't think we've ever interviewed her. So this should be a fun get to know you kind of thing with Julie, and kind of get a feel for where she's at and what's happening in the legislature. And it's going to be interesting stuff. So we're ready to rock and roll, and we're going to be moving forward. And I guess that's there we go. Okay. I think we've got it. I think we are all ready here to start. Whoa, I just started something that I wasn't supposed to. Okay, so let's quickly here, before we jump into this with Ben Carpenter, we got about 6-7 minutes here. There's a couple headlines that caught my eye. Just a couple headlines that caught my eye. First and foremost, there's a good piece by Yareth Rosen over at the Alaska Beacon. I mean, credit where credit's due. I'm usually chastising the news coverage on many things from all the outlets because it just doesn't seem like, we're getting a lot of information. But Yareth Rosen over at the Alaska Beacon has got a great article talking specifically about the Willow Oil Project and the fact that it's going to cost us some money in the short term. It is, this is what Keithley and I were talking about on Tuesday, that because of the ability to defer taxation or to write certain portions of taxation off on the Willow project on some of their other projects, we are going to lose about $160 million a year in revenues. It's just going to go away. They say 1.64 billion, according to the analysis from Bill Walker's. This is back in November of 2018, when Bill Walker was governor. They released an analysis to legislators that calculated over a 10-year period, the state would lose about $1.64 billion through the development of Willow. So those numbers may change, but estimate that we're going to lose probably more than $100 million a year in revenue for a period of time over 10 years. They said the estimates are that the first time that they would actually see a positive uptick in cash flow would probably be 2035. So 12 years from now. And then it would produce from 2035 through 2050. So, and it would generate about $5.4 billion in state revenue over its lifetime. This is all from that analysis. So, we're going to lose out a little bit on the front end, and we're going to make something on the back end. But this is not the instant fix that I think many people expect or assume that it's going to be. Now, that being said, it is going to be good for employment and other things that trickle down from many other components of it. There'll still be more workers building and operating it. There'll be more oil in the pipeline. It'll extend the life of the pipeline for that. It will, hopefully stop or stymie some of the decline in oil production that we've seen. So there's some positives to Willow. But again, we should always be going into these things eyes wide open, understanding that this is not the panacea or the magic bullet that I think many people think it is, because they don't understand that Willow is on federal lands. It's not on Alaska state land. And so we don't receive the royalties and the revenues on that. We benefit from greatly. We benefit from the economic development component of it, where we have to build out to it, we have to run it, we have to employ Alaskans to do that. That's how we benefit. And again, I think this reinforces what Brad was saying earlier, that we need to immediately now pivot on our support to Pika, which is on Alaska land, and we would see a much more immediate benefit in that. But this is an interesting article over at the Alaska Beacon, and they actually have reposted it. Of course they have, at the ADN. So Willow Oil Project expected to cost Alaska Treasury more than it brings in during the early years is the name of the story. So go check it out. Then I saw this story, and I must say that, actually, let me go to this one first. Alaska legislators are again on track to ignore the 90-day session imposed by voters. Of course they are, because half the time I feel like I can feel those guys down in Juneau just giving me the finger from 1,500 miles away. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, you want us to be done in 90 days? Here's what I have to say to you, buddy. That's kind of what I feel like sometimes. 17 years ago, Alaska voters narrowly approved a ballot measure setting a 90-day limit for legislative sessions. Only 4 times since then have lawmakers finished their work in 90 days or fewer, and in one of those 4 years, they immediately went into a special session. In all other years since then, the session has lasted longer than 90 days, and they're already they're already saying it's not going to happen. We're already halfway through 121 days. We've got a lot to do on these big issues. So no, we're not going to be getting out in 90 days, said Senate President Gary Stevens. He says, I think there's no doubt in my mind that we'll be here through 121. I mean, just ignore the will of the people. Court rulings have upheld the ability of the legislature to work to the constitutional limit, saying that guideline takes precedence over the one imposed by the ballot measure. Matt Clayman, to his credit, has proposed a constitutional amendment this year that would require the legislature to abide by a 90-day limit, and he has done that as well in the past. It's just never gone anywhere. All right. Final story before we go to break and we pick up things with Ben Carpenter. The new Alaska State Officers Compensation Commission. And by new, I don't even know if I mentioned this, but on Tuesday, the governor basically, everybody resigned on this commission. Remember a week ago, 10 days ago, the Senate, Gary Stevens said, we're not accepting any of these things because they're not increasing the legislator's salary. We're not going to increase the governor's salary. We're not going to increase the commissioner's salary. We're not going to do anything because this committee just keeps bringing the wrong thing back. Well, on Tuesday, the governor, Monday or Tuesday, the governor basically, two of them resigned, and the governor basically removed them from their positions on Tuesday afternoon. Then apparently new commissioners were brought in. New commissioners were brought in by the governor, by Gary Stevens, and by Kathy Tilton, because the Senate majority and the Senate and the House majority both got to pick one person for them. And then they immediately called a meeting after apparently waiving the requirement for 20-day notification, and held a meeting on Wednesday where they unanimously increased legislator salaries from $50,000 a year to $84,000 a year, and did not touch the per diem. So on top of that, the $307 per day tax-free per diem would add roughly $37,000 per year for legislators who can claim them during an entire 121-day session. So 84,000 plus 30, 124 plus 7, $133,000 if they took per diem for every day of the session and the new thing, and they passed it unanimously. Now, I got some questions about this. I got some questions about the rapidity and the speed. I mean, first of all, they just waived the need for a 20-day notice on any of these things. And they waived the rule that requires them to notice meetings 20 days before they're held, allowing them to amend the previous commissioner's recommendations immediately. And the chair of the committee, when questioned by by Sean McGuire and Ira Samuels from the ADN, you just got to read this article. It is just, my head is kind of spinning over what exactly just happened. Surprise, surprise, surprise. $84,000 plus $37,000 in per diem potentially for each one of the legislators. And I'm not saying that we didn't need to take a look at this and discuss it, but my God, all the committee members are gone by Tuesday afternoon, and on Wednesday the new committee votes for a new bill. That's a new option. That's wow. That's all. I just got to say wow, and then I say it backwards. Wow. All right. So talk amongst yourselves on that one for a little bit. Just talk amongst yourselves. We'll return in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Ben Carpenter, our guest, up next. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with more right after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Well, I obviously am in the wrong line of work. That's all I could say right now. I'm in the wrong line of work. $130,000 a year to, work really hard for 4 months and then part-time for the rest of the year to make $137,000 a year, $33,000 a year. I'm all about that. Sign me up. How do I do it? All right, let's go over here and check I don't have the temperament to be a legislator. The sergeant at arms would drag me off in handcuffs at some point for bitch slapping somebody. All right, let's go over here to the green room and pull Ben Carpenter out of the ether and get ready to go. Good morning, my friend. How are you this morning?
Good morning, sir. Can you hear me well?
You're a little quiet there.
I'll have to figure that out then.
Okay, well, let me see how much I can turn you up from my end. Oh, I could turn you up some from my end. Let's try that again.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Okay, all right. So
we plugged in a different microphone to see if it would help.
Oh, whoa, there you go. You found the button, whatever you just did, and all of a sudden you were.
Well, I'll leave it there then.
Yeah, you were clear for a minute, so we're good to go. As long as we're not feeding back my own voice into the microphone, we're good. So how you been, my friend? How's tricks down there?
It's good. We're having fun. Lots to do.
Yeah, lots to do.
Lots of heavy lift things. I'm not sure what's going on with those shenanigans on the legislator pay. I don't know anything about it. It seems like premature to be talking about giving us raises when we haven't solved any problems yet.
You think? I mean, well, again, the whole thing of you're fired next morning. Oh, look, here's our new plan. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And how can they? I mean, this is a public meeting. I mean, this is a whole thing on the Alaska Open Meetings Act. You can't just waive your 20-day notice. I mean, let's just waive the notice. Okay, sounds good. Let's go. What?
I know that a pay raise is a priority of some members of the other body, and I don't share that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I could use the money, but I'd put it to good use. But
yeah,
I don't think that it's the appropriate time to have that conversation. Let's do what we came down here to do. Let's solve some of the problems, and then we can say, hey, we've earned our pay.
Just from an optics standpoint, I think that would be the last thing that you would take care of at the very end of the session, right? I mean, you do everything you could do to make everything right, and then you'd be like, okay, well, we worked hard, so now we can spend a day talking about this and getting the thing. And oh no, I mean, 12 hours after everybody's gone, we brought somebody new in, and they've got a new plan. I mean, wow.
If obstruction and distraction is the name of the game for some people, this is a great distraction, right? Let's talk about legislator pay instead of the important things that we need to be talking about.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I just had to laugh because somebody apparently didn't get all the playbook because the questions that were asked from the committee members and and they're like, I don't know how I came up with that idea. I don't know where I got that number or that. I have no idea. Maybe I read it somewhere. I mean, this is something he actually said. Maybe I read it somewhere in the thing. I'm just like, oh man.
Don't ask me. I don't know either.
Yeah, no, there's some real puppeteering going on somewhere in there. It's an interesting deal. All right, well, Ben, hold the line. I don't know what's going on with my thing here. Hold on a second. Because we still got, okay. All right. We still got a minute. So I want to talk to you obviously about the presser. There was that interesting tweet from Landfield, which I think the first time I read it, I misunderstood actually what he said, or maybe I just jumped to a conclusion. And then I read it again. And then I'm like, I need more context. And so then I went and actually watched the presser and watched your response and Kathy Tilton's response. And I thought, well, that makes a lot more sense. And I think that even his takeaway from it was not exactly, I think he and I both misunderstood to begin with until I got it all in context. So I want to talk about the PFD and how important it is. But at the same time, what you're saying is we need to kind of just focus on the budget and ignore the PFD for now because of good reason.
Not the budget. Check your email. I've got an image there I'd like to use to.
All right, here we go. Okay, welcome back to the program. We're continuing now with Representative Ben Carpenter. He starts with us today. Yesterday, we had some analysis and some discussion on what was happening with the PFD. They had a press conference on Monday, and during that press conference, there was a discussion and a question from Jeff Landfield about the PFD. And when I first read the tweet on it, I was a little confused, but once I got it in context, I felt a little bit better about it because Landfield said, asked about the size of the dividend and how the public hasn't been as concerned with the amount as in the past years. Representative Carpenter gave an interesting answer. He said we should be more concerned about the economy than fighting over the PFD. Much different tone than in the past. And that immediately made me go, what? But in context, it makes sense. So we're going to talk with Representative Ben Carpenter about that. And he is with us right now. Good morning, Ben. How are you? How are things going?
I'm doing very well.
Good. So I guess, like I said during the break, I had to see this in context before I really understand what it was that you were saying, and then understand that you've got a couple different bills in the Ways and Means Committee that are dealing with the PFD, and your whole focus here has been what we talked about, that holistic approach that the working group, fiscal policy working group, came up with, that basically says we got to deal with everything all at once. So don't focus on just one thing. Is that what you're kind of saying in this when you were talking about this on at the press conference, that this is again kind of that holistic approach to everything?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Well, but I do believe that that's part of the solution, is to focus on this on a holistic level. But if you check your email, there's an image there that might be helpful with this. It's from a presentation last night at Ways and Means. We're talking about education. And my comment to the question from Jeff Landfield, and I appreciate him highlighting the press conference. I'm glad that people could go and listen to the press conference as opposed to just judging off the tweet. But we've got 7 bills that deal with the PFD in Ways and Means. I've collected them. That's where we intentionally wanted them to go. So that represents 7 different thoughts on what to do with the PFD, right? That's the level, or the level of non-agreement on what we should be doing. My point was, instead of talking about how much we're going to get on a PFD, we should be talking about how we're going to grow our economy, and in the context of what a PFD does to our economy. And this slide is a busy slide, but it talks about increasing spending or higher spending doesn't necessarily equate to better outcomes within our education system. But I want to highlight the diagram shows and focus on the color of the diagram. So down in the bottom right-hand corner, you see the economic disadvantaged scale that goes from green to red. And then you see all the circles representing the different schools within the state of Alaska. And what's really key is that your low income, economically disadvantaged, low performing schools are in your bottom right-hand corner of the quadrant. And the higher income, less economically disadvantaged families and higher performing schools exist in the upper left-hand quadrant. So as we're talking about putting money towards the school system, that's not solving anything, because what's really at play here is economics. So your bottom right-hand quadrant with those schools, those represent families that don't have a whole lot of economic options. So as we're looking at trying to solve the economy problem, education is part of that. And I want to highlight that if you would just focus on growing the state's economy, it's going to help solve some of the problems that we're recognizing and that we're trying to throw government solutions at and more government money at. But what we really need to be talking about is, what do we do to set conditions for economic growth within the state? And to the extent that a PFD can help with the economic growth of our economy, where people have jobs and earn a living, then that's what we should be discussing with the PFD, not how do we throw more government money at a problem to solve it. It isn't the government that's going to solve this problem. It is a growth and an increase in our economy and where our family has more money to spend. This graph demonstrates that very well to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at it again, and for those of you on the radio, I apologize. You'll have to go back out and take a look at the podcast, or maybe Representative Carpenter could post this up on his Facebook page. But this graph, basically on the right-hand side in the lower quadrant is all the economically disadvantaged. It's also on the score line for the amount of money spent on a per student basis. And we're talking about the worst educational outcomes in the most economically disadvantaged communities, still taking the most money, $35,000 and $40,000 per pupil. Will more money fix that? I mean, again, the argument would be, I don't necessarily think that more money, if you're already spending $40,000 a student, how is spending more going to fix it? There's something fundamentally flawed in there.
So I'm just trying to get us to a point where we stop talking about government solutions and start talking about free market economic solutions where people can take care of themselves. This is the crux of the problem down here, is that we don't talk about that. We just talk about what we need to do with the funds that we have available to us and what government solutions are going to solve the problems. And that is fundamentally flawed. So that's
right.
That's why I responded to Landfill the way I did, is that I want to stop talking about how much we need to pay in a dividend every year, because it's not talking about what we need to be talking about, which is economic growth.
And I think, I agree with you. I agree with you, Ben. I think that this is the look at the more, again, kind of that holistic approach of what is the overall economy doing? We need to quit looking to the government for, and this is what we talked about with Senator Rob Myers, was when we achieve that disconnect between the public sector and the private sector. When the public sector doesn't have to pay attention to the private sector at all, that's how we've gotten things so out of control on this, right? I mean, we've got to look to that holistic attitude of we're conjoined. One needs to drive the other. They cannot operate in a vacuum.
That's right. And we've got one cash cow. We've got a state government funding system that's largely tied to one cash cow, which is our oil industry, right? And to the extent that our oil industry is going to fluctuate over time, and the political environment means really that it's challenged to grow like it has in the past. So if you're looking for the Alaska economy to grow based on oil and gas development, that's not a very good bet to make. So where can we grow our economy within other sectors, right? That's the focus that we should be doing. And how can government get out of the way to enable that to happen? Like, we've got the fourth highest corporate income tax. It was like 9% for the highest graduated portion of the corporate income tax. Well, that's not an incentive to come to Alaska and do business. That's right. The opposite. That's like a wet blanket on any incentive to do business.
Well, we were kind of making the joke yesterday that here we are, the 49th state. Not just the 49th state is in the number of states, but 49th in education, 49 in business environment, 49th in, you could just tick off the boxes like we're at the bottom of the pile as far as attractiveness for many, many reasons. And the answer obviously cannot continue to, the answer that they've continued to try and throw at it is, this more government spend, this will do it. We'll create jobs. We'll do this. We'll do that. But that's obviously not working. We had the largest budget in state history last year. Still not fixing anything.
Yeah. The only other long-term plan that's at play right now is some members believe that we just need to fund state government from our permanent fund earnings. And that presents some issues. As you've seen from this year, we've had high inflation and we've had low returns. We're likely to have high inflation next year, and we're likely to have some low returns next year. We are rapidly approaching a point with a 5% market value draw structure of how we're going to spend the earnings from the permanent fund, where if you've got 2 or 3 years of high inflation and low returns and a 5% market value draw, in order to draw to pay either a dividend or money going to the state, you're going to pull money from the corpus after the ERA balance is gone. You're going to pull money from the corpus to do either of those two things.
No, exactly. And that's the problem, because then you're eating the seed corn, right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah, you're eating the seed corn at that point. And there's a whole, like you said, there's a whole cadre out there who have been talking about that, rubbing their hands together with a pie in the sky. We can't wait for the permanent fund to hit $100 million because then we can, well, now it has to be 110 or 115.
It's just as risky as oil money.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to shift away from talking about being on a one-trick pony and look for more ponies in the stable. We need a growing economy in different sectors. And how do you tie that to the spending of the state government? Because then the government cares that part of the economy grows.
Right. And so just to clarify, we need to be concerned about the economy rather than fighting over the PFD. But that doesn't mean that the PFD is not important to you or the majority. I mean, I think that's
correct.
Yeah, I think
my personal take is that money that gets distributed out of the permanent fund earnings, the more of it that goes into the private sector, the more small businesses benefit from that. Yes, there's a certain amount of waste, but there's a certain amount of waste in government spending as well.
Well,
the point is that to the extent we've got a political solution to get the PFD football out of the picture every year, the government just pays the dividend like it did in the past. Then we can move on to other conversations, but it sucks the oxygen out of the room and prevents us from having the other more important conversations, like what do we do to get the economy growing?
Right. Well, you've got some people on your staff who understand how money turns in an economy, right? I mean, so we know that money in a private economy turns 6, 7, 8 times. We know that money that goes into the public, that money that's spent by the government versus the private sector, it turns less than 1 time in the economy. So, of course, the PFD is important to the economics of it, but it's just a part. And I guess what I was saying is the implication, and I don't think it was intentional on Landfield's part. I think it was just the way that it was worded. It implied in some way that, well, Ben Carpenter, we just don't care about the PFD. We care about the economy as a whole. But no, it's all part and parcel of it. Yes, the PFD is important, but the overall economy and this dependency on government that we've created, we are a dependency state at this point. If we don't fix that, then nothing is going to get fixed.
Yeah, and I'm not sure where we are on the break here, Michael, but I'd like to quickly hit some of the options that we have in Ways and Means about the PFD.
I want to do that. We're 1 minute out, so what we'll do is what we're going to talk with Ben Carpenter about next is the options that are up in Ways and Means right now, 2 House joint resolutions and his own bill that hopefully could fix a lot of this issue. And I'm kind of excited to talk about it. So Ben, hold the line. Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're going to continue here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show continues. Again, Ben Carpenter from Ways and Means Committee, representative down on the peninsula, and we will return with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we are in the break right now with Ben Carpenter going on, and we'll change gears. We won't jump into those bills yet until we return to the radio, but you know, I can't. The more we've been thinking about it in this last couple of days, we've really been diving into this, Ben. Kind of this idea of we have created such a dependency state in Alaska. You know, it's really welfare for every direction. We've got the standardized welfare that we consider welfare on the one side, Medicaid and the thing and the food stamps and everything else on the one hand. And on the other hand, we've got all the corporate welfare that's going on. And it's like those of us who are kind of in the middle are just getting squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And I said it yesterday. I said, eventually what'll happen is the only private economy left in the state of Alaska is the private economy that will be servicing the government. That's it. There won't be any other free market private economy.
Ronald Reagan said it, right? He's like, the government is the problem, not the solution. And I'm paraphrasing because he said it much better than I could. all I can do is help the next generation see. Hopefully they make sure. I've got my daughter with me this year. Come here, Jenna.
Oh, do you?
Yep,
Come on
she's
down.
down here as a Senate page, and we are having fun learning about state government.
Oh yeah, I bet her eyes are about that wide half the time. Like, what's going on? What's going? I'm sure it's a real crash course, isn't it? In everything that's going on down there.
Most definitely.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, I can't imagine. I watch it from afar, and I'm like biting my nails half the time because I'm so frustrated with everything that's going on. I imagine being down there, at least you feel like you're doing something. So congratulations, that is awesome. Thanks for what's her name? You didn't give me her name.
This is Jenna.
Jenna. All right. Well, Jenna, thanks for letting us have your dad for a little bit here this morning, where we can explain some stuff.
You are welcome.
Sure we interrupted breakfast or something important, so it's good. Well, and just learn well from him. That's all I can say right now. Ben, being in the majority now, how has that changed? What do I got? I got about 3 minutes here. How has that changed the dynamic for you? Especially, I know you've been fighting. You were part of the fiscal policy group. You've been pushing on this for a couple of years now. How has the majority change? How has it changed the dynamic for you?
Well, I'm, as chair of Ways and Means, I'm getting to do exactly what I wanted to do for the last 4 years, which is talk about a long-term fiscal plan and help influence that conversation. And for me personally, it's being in the majority is like a light switch, right? I get to control the agenda. I get to decide what we're going to talk about in committee. And it's not like it's all my call. I've got committee members that have a say in this as well. So we have to work together. And I think that we're doing a very good job doing that moving forward. We don't agree on everything all the time, and that's to be expected. But we are trying to keep the big picture in mind and moving the conversation forward about how, when we're done at the end of this legislature, are we going to have have placed ourselves in a better position moving forward financially or not? And
right.
Anyway, we get to make the decisions, or at least present the options, and hopefully make good decisions about where we're going.
Hopefully convince some other people that what we've been doing. It's like this smashing your head against the wall repeatedly. I mean, at some point you got to stop, okay? Because that's where we're at right now. We've been doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And we're just like, at some point you got to stop digging the hole, right? Stop digging the hole and move up on it. And I just want to say, I want to clarify again, you're not giving up on the PFD. You're saying this is part of a larger piece in the puzzle. And we're going to see that in this next segment when we talk about the bills. You're not giving up on the PFD, but we need to stop focusing on it exclusively. We need to get that behind us so that it doesn't take up all the oxygen in the room. Am I paraphrasing?
I agree. That is exactly the case. And the PFD problem is just a money problem. It's just numbers. You just have to figure out what numbers you want to put in what categories. The bigger problem is the political problem that kind of sits on it like a big elephant. It just weighs everything down, right? And that political problem is what has to be solved within the legislature. It's a political animal. So to the extent that whatever numbers we can come up with, whatever systems we can create to solve that political problem, that finds agreement on what the financial piece of it needs to look like.
No, again, like I said before, we're treating the symptoms instead of the disease. It seems like that's what we've been doing for years in triaging this. We see all these symptoms, and so we're trying to constantly slather bandages and salve on these symptoms when they don't realize that we've got a punctured femoral artery, and we should probably stitch that up and make it stop, right? That's kind of where we're at. All right, so Ben Carpenter is our guest. We're going to continue here in just a second. We're going to go through some of the bills that are currently sitting in Ways and Means that will deal with the PFD itself, and we'll get that information. By the way, Ben, that chart, was that from Sarah Montalbano's presentation? Is that what that was from?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right, we're going to talk with her next week. All right, The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes. the one with the show.
That's right. The Michael Duke Show continues. Ben Carpenter is our guest, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and also a legislator for the peninsula down there in the Mid-Peninsula, not the Southern Peninsula, the Mid-Peninsula.
North Peninsula.
North Peninsula. He's high. He's north of the South. It's somewhere in there. Ben Carpenter, our guest. Before we went to break, we were talking about how, because again, I think what could have been read into the comments earlier was that you were just throwing your hands up on the PFD and you wanted to focus on something different. That's not the case. You're focusing on the PFD by dealing with that, but we have to keep our eye on the ball, which is the larger economic issues, the economy itself. And you were like, the PFD will take care of itself. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And then I started thinking about the bills that are in your committee. If those bills can get out, you're right. The PFD will take care of itself. So let's talk about it. You got a couple resolutions, you got a couple constitutional amendments, and then you've got one bill from yourself as well. So let's talk about the bills that are in House Ways and Means.
Yeah. So thanks, Michael. And at a very high level, your options presented thus far by members are to do a 25-75 split, 25% of the draw to a dividend and 75 going to the government, and using a POMV model. You've got $1,000 dividend using a POMV model, 5% of the POMV. You've got, some permanent constitutional amendments that put either the POMV model or the old statutory 21% of net earnings into the Constitution, and whichever is, I think it's more, is going to be the one that we use for calculation of the dividend fund. So those are some of the options. The bills that I have authored that I think would help would be to just, and this is kind of along the lines of what the Fiscal Policy Working Group is looking towards, and what I think is politically feasible, is to put into the Constitution a shall pay a PFD, right? So you modify the Constitution to deal with the Wielkowski case and dedicate the fund and dedicate the income from the fund by statute. So the constitutional amendment would say, constitutionally, you shall pay a PFD, and then by statute, because the Constitution would then be pointing to the statute as the thing that has to happen, but you give yourself the leeway in the legislature to be able to change that statute. You just have to change it through the legislative process, not the appropriations process. So it completely takes it out of the appropriations process.
Right. So we're turning the clock back onto the pre-Walker administration, when it was never part of the appropriations. It was never counted as income and outgo. It was just a shall transfer. That's what it looked like. And then, of course, Walker came in and changed it and started accounting for it as actual revenue and everything else. That's where we got screwed up. So this would change it back to a shell transfer, giving it a statutory component to say that's the amount. Here's my question for you on that, because I like that idea. I like the idea of going back to the shell transfer. My question then doesn't the statutory component of them then become the wiffle ball that goes back and forth during the legislative session?
Not in that sense, because it could, but it would require a bill during the legislative process, not through the budget process, the appropriations process. So right now, the discussion is, hey, is the PFD going to be in the budget or not in the budget? But with this change, the PFD would just be paid. My bill also takes the entire PFD program out of the Department of Revenue and puts it into the Permanent Fund Corporation. So the Permanent Fund Corporation would just determine the amount of payment that's going to be made to the dividend program and to state government, and they would cut checks. They would cut a check to state government, and they would cut a check to the people for the dividend. And it wouldn't be part of what we do. It just would just get done because the Permanent Fund Corporation would have to follow the law.
Right. No, I mean, I think it's a great idea. Now, the question is, because we talked about HGR 8 and HGR 9, right? Which are the two components for putting the statutory formula in the Constitution, or putting some kind of 50. Can these things be done together? Does one counteract the other? Do we bring them down to one bill? What does it look like?
I'm not sure that you have support within the legislature to put an actual number in the Constitution, right? 5% of the market value or 50% of the income those numbers people balk at. And this is what we talked about in the fiscal policy working group is kind of a bellwether of the entire legislature. We had agreement that we need to constitutionalize that to ensure that a PFD will be paid, but the amount of the PFD and how that formula is made, it wasn't agreement that needs to be in the Constitution. I don't mind that be in the Constitution, but I'm trying to solve the political problem, which is finding an agreement on something that will work. So if you put through the Constitution to be able to allow the legislature to dedicate this fund, the income of the fund, put that in the Constitution, and then put a statute in place that tells the Permanent Fund Corporation to just pay the payments, both to government and to the dividend program, then they follow the statute, and we would have to change that statute through the legislative process every year, as opposed to changing it within the budget process, which is a much easier thing to do. We just put it in the budget. So that would be a systemic way to solve this issue.
No, and I agree, and I misspoke. It's HJR 7 and 8, not 8 and 9. So it's 7 and 8 were the two that you were speaking about, Peter. So really, it's kind of, we have to choose one, and which one do we want to go with? I like yours, quite honestly, because again, it takes that to me, that shall transfer thing is the most important part, because it takes the debate out of the arena of the legislature of do we include it or don't we include it, or how do we juggle it, or how do we smash it down, or what do we, do we just do the leftover or whatever. So give me some timelines here on how this works coming through your committee and how and as it comes out.
Well, again, we're not going to discuss this just in the context of having only a PFD discussion. We're going to talk about this in the context of a fiscal policy working group solution that has multiple components. So between now and the end of the month, we're going to have some conversations about some other things like revenue and reductions in spending, that type of thing, that need to be part of the plan, because that was part of the fiscal policy working group agreement to get a political solution, right? So we're going to continue to have this discussion, and we're going to model, that's the technical term, of putting all the components together and seeing how they relate to each other on a spreadsheet, and charts and graphs to show what happens when you institute one part of this and how does it relate to another part. So that's all going to happen here over the next few weeks to explain what our options are. I'm concerned that if we use the 5% of market value for the PFD portion of this, which seems to be the prevailing thought in the legislature right now, that we're going to be spending out of the corpus to pay dividends or to pay state government, however we decide. And I don't think that the Alaskan people are really interested in seeing that happen. But that's the problem that you run into, the potential, when you go to a 5% of market value instead of just a 21% of net earnings. In that case, if you didn't have any earnings, you don't have any dividend or state government spending. But when you use a 5% of market value, you're going to draw from the fund, regardless of whether you had a good investment year or not. Right. And if you don't have any money in the ERA, then the only place to get that's from the corpus. And so it's a kind of a situation where we've got a whole bunch of bad things happening all at the same time. High inflation, low returns. Who would have thought that would be happening?
Right.
A year ago.
And the spring forecast is not painting us the rosy picture that we hope for, right? I mean, we can look at what's going on with oil and now the banking crisis, and oil is going to take a tumble even more. And we're setting ourselves up for complete failure if we don't nip this in the bud.
Yeah, and I think we just need to be forward thinking on this and don't pick a solution that's going to allow us to reduce the value of the corpus of the main fund.
Representative Ben Carpenter is our guest, legislator for the Peninsula and chair of the House Ways and Means Committee. So we should expect other components to come out, because that was one of the criticisms earlier. I know Will Staff's bill got some pushback from Cliff Grow and others to say, well, this is not just, they said that they wanted to do it all. Well, now we need other bills that deals with revenues, that deals with cuts, that deals with, the size and scope, that deals with all these other things. So those things are forthcoming, then, is what you're telling us right now.
That's right. We already have spending limit bills in Ways and Means. We have PFD bills in Ways and Means. We need to have some, how do you make government more efficient bills in Ways and Means, right? I don't think there's political will to cut the government very much, right?
Right.
not even in my own caucus. So
Yeah.
we've got to look at getting a more leaner, more effective government as a management decision over time. And we have to put in place the correct statutes that require better management. Because I can tell you, it's very frustrating to sit in finance subcommittee hearings and be presented with information that doesn't really tell me anything from a management point of view.
Right.
It's like I'm having to pull information from you, and I don't even know where to ask. So we need the statutes to say, to spell out what information you're supposed to present to the legislature that is pertinent to us to be able to make the decision. And that's basically a management issue. So to the extent that we can make that long-term change, that would help us identify where we can become more lean and more effective as state government.
Ben, we're less than 90 seconds here. What can people do to help you? What can us average listeners do to help you?
Well, I would say turn off the boob tube and watch Ways and Means on Monday and Wednesday evenings, 6 to 8 p.m., and educate yourself on what we're talking about, and then get a hold of your legislator and let them know what you're thinking.
Just to encourage them to say, this is what I support, this is what I don't support. And again, a full unified theory, a holistic approach is really the only answer, because if we continue to try and pull this apart piecemeal, it's not going to fix anything, and it'll get stalled somewhere along in the process.
You're never going to find the solution politically if you're not able to communicate a comprehensive reform package and how that's going to relate to each other.
Ben Carpenter, our guest here on the Michael Duke Show. Ben, we appreciate the hard work that you got going on. We should be seeing these new bills drop in the next week or two, or what do you think?
Yeah, probably.
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out. Monday and Wednesdays, 6 to 8 p.m. The Ways and Means committees. You can see it on Gavel to Gavel at KTOO. Ben, thanks so much for taking time out this morning to explain this to us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Good to see you again. Good to talk to you.
You too, my friend. We will talk to you again soon. All right, the Michael Duke Show continues. We got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. Julie Coulombe is going to be with us, and we're going to be talking with her about the ghost positions. Back with more. Oh, I mean, he's not wrong when he says his own caucus is not interested in cutting the budget. I mean, we saw that. Many players in his caucus now are the ones that wouldn't stand up and defend the governor's vetoes back in the day. I mean, it's what we've talked about. The political will to make significant cuts is not there, but if we could find some cuts, $200-300 million worth of cuts, if we can increase the oil taxation by $300 or $400 or $500 million, if we can find, some of these new revenues, whether it's the carbon scheme, or whether it's a sales tax or an income tax or something. I mean, again, it's got to be the holistic approach of it. I don't want to see any more taxes. I would rather see it come out of the cut side, because it obviously could. It obviously could. That could be it. That could be it. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. But you just don't have the people who are willing to fight the storm, fight the backlash of that kind of stuff. It's pretty interesting to say the least. All right, let's get on to what do we got? Julie Coulombe is going to be joining us here in a few minutes, and we're going to be talking with her in just a minute. I need to get caught up in the chat room. I don't think I've hardly read anything out of the chat room yet today, because there's lots of stuff going on. Let me go back over here to the comments and see what you guys are saying. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, I mean, Ben, I think Ben's a good egg. I really enjoy talking with Ben. All right, let me go back over here. Anyone interested in school funding as well as Ben Carpenter's thoughts should watch the Ways and Means Committee from last night. About midway through, he has a really good comment on resource development with respect to education funding. Oh, I should have seen that earlier. I would have asked him to repeat it. Has anyone heard how the courthouse sit-in went? I have not. Let's see. And they are getting a raise. And they are getting a raise. Yeah. They are getting a raise. $50,000 to $80,000, $50,000 to $84,000. That's what they're getting. They're getting a $30,000 raise, plus still keeping the per diem. So another $37,000 on top of that, potentially. Brian says he's not really surprised. Bill says what I said. I need to be a legislator. Tawny, she wins the savage comment for the internet today. That can do that increase so quickly, but can't finish the session in 90 days. Right? I mean, the people are fired on a Tuesday afternoon, and the new committee holds a meeting on Wednesday and passes something. Dang. I mean, oof. Look at that scatter chart to see that one reason for our poor education outcomes is because we have a decreasing economic outlook. And I'll show you that scatter chart one more time here, just because it is it's an interesting snapshot. And we're going to go over this with Sarah Montalbano on I'm going to try and get her on the show on Monday. We're going to try and go over this because, this has some interesting, this brings some interesting things to light. Especially when you look at the fact that I'm thinking that by looking at this right-hand quadrant of the chart, it's going to tell us one thing, which is more money is not going to fix it. We've got some of the most separate and some of the most disappointing results in this area here on the bottom lower right quadrant. And, we're spending $25,000 to $40,000 per student in there. Is that really fixing the problem? Is more money really going to fix the problem? I think the answer is probably a resounding no. All right, let me see. I'm still going through the chat room. I see that Julie is in the green room right now. We're going to talk with her in just a second. Number one, so I can make sure that I'm pronouncing her last name right. It's so embarrassing when I can't pronounce somebody's last name. It's like a forehead slapping moment. All right. The government is not the solution to the problem. Oh, that's Reagan's quote. The government is not the solution to the problem. The government is the problem, to which I would say, thank you, Ben. Let's see. I don't think that a snowball's chance in passing the Senate. Hawk doesn't think that those bills will pass the Senate. I don't know. Oh my God, Ben, you mentioned following the law. What a concept. Excellent. But will it ever happen? I don't know. I just don't know. All right. Clean up the unfilled positions, said Greg. And that's what we're going to talk. One of the things we're going to talk about with Julie here in a minute. Man, you guys were verbose this morning. Got a bunch of comments in here. All right. I'm just going to go over. Hopefully, hope Ben's moral compass rubs off on a few more in Juneau, says Sandy. Yeah, I agree. Okay, let's go over here and check in with our guest. Make sure that the audio and everything is working fine, and that I am pronouncing names right, because nothing more embarrassing. Julie joins us this morning. Hello, Julie. How are you?
Hello. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
I can. So is it Coulombe? Is it Coulombe? What is it, Julie? Just tell me. Just tell me before I embarrass myself even more.
It's Coulombe. My
Coulombe.
husband is French Canadian, so the B is not pronounced.
Okay, Coulombe.
Yes.
So, all right. See, we can be taught. It's like a monkey.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I know people feel bad about it, but I'm used to it, so it's no big deal.
I mean, you could just have a simple name like mine, right? I mean,
yeah,
or
right.
Maybe not. I don't know. People are like, Duke? What? Duke? No, there's an S on the end. Put up your Dukes. That's it. So, all right. Julie, we're going to be jumping back into you here in just a second. All right. Hold the line. We'll be right back. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That's just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the...
Yep, live around the world on the interwebs at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the links to the audio-only live stream, the podcast, and, of course, to all our social media, where we simulcast the show every morning on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, and all the other stuff, plus live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator, The Michael Dukes Show. Welcome to Hour 2. It's Thursday. We just finished up with Ben Carpenter. Fantastic interview, by the way, as usual. Not due to my had nothing to do with me. Ben Carpenter was on the line. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it on the live stream on Facebook or YouTube, or you can just download the podcast wherever you find it. I like Spotify. You can use Spotify, CastBox, Stitcher, iTunes, Google, whatever you want to do. All right. So that was last hour. This hour, going to be another good one. We are being joined by Representative Julie Coulombe, who is coming in this morning to talk a little bit about the legislature. We've never had a chance to speak with her, so we want to get her feel as a new legislator and everything else. But specifically, I want to dive down into her chair of the Department of Education and Early Development Subcommittee, and because there was something in this article that came out in the Alaska Beacon yesterday that just blood immediately started to shoot from my eyes when I read it, because it is my pet peeve, and somebody finally said something about it out in the thing, and it's amazing. So let's quit the yammering, and we'll jump over right now, and we'll be joined by Julie Coulombe, who is with us this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? I'm doing great.
I'm doing fantastic. Now, we've never got a chance to talk, which is unfortunate. I know that the election season was super busy, and I'd made requests to everybody, but not everybody got a chance to get on the show. So it's good to talk with you. And so I guess first things first, if you don't mind, we'll just do a little bit of a walk down memory lane, or tell people a little bit about who you are, where you came from. What exactly did you lose your mind and decide to jump into this madness, right? And let's get a little bit of background on you.
Great. Yeah, I can do that. So my husband and I have been in Alaska for 35 years. My husband was active duty Army. That's what originally brought us up here. And so we traveled around the country for a while. Then he got a job at the Alaska National Guard, Army National Guard. And so we could stay put and raise our 4 kids. And that's what we've been doing. We've been working hard and raising children for the last 25 years. So my background is in the private sector. And so as a new legislator, this has been a tough learning curve. Let's just put it that way. I've never worked for state government, so it's
a little eye-opening. Is that what you're saying? Is a little eye-opening, a little like trying to take a sip from a fire hose?
Yeah. Well, so the information for sure. It's the mentality that I'm struggling with. So my background, I graduated from UAA with a journalism, public communications degree. I ended up working a little bit in advertising and marketing for a while, went home and raised kids for a while, and then went back into business management. And so I managed, Target, I managed several Alaska clubs. And so I was really familiar with hiring, firing, making numbers work, performance metrics. You don't measure up, there's consequences. So that's just my mentality, right? So I landed on finance, And then I land on these subcommittees, and it was just what's the best word? Appalling, maybe.
Yeah, appalling,
What I
shocking.
was finding. So what I did find was the commissioners were, really passionate about their departments. And I think for the most part, they really want to do a good job in the mission at hand. It's just a different mentality from the private sector on how you get that mission done. And so that's kind of what I was walking through. I did the subcommittees for education, public safety, and administration.
Right.
And administration particularly was a mammoth department. It connects to every other department in the state. And so that was definitely drinking from a fire hose. But to go back, so I really, once my last child had gone to college, and we bought a cabin in Homer to retire and to hang out. And then I was approached to run, and I said no. And then I was approached again, and I just thought, I always was frustrated with Juneau because I never felt like my voice was ever represented. And here I have an opportunity. We had stopped working full time. We didn't have kids, and just felt like it was my responsibility to kick in and do my time. A lot of people over the years were doing it when I was too busy. And so I felt a responsibility that, I need to do what I can to what's going on in Juneau. And I won my election in the ranked choice second round. So it was kind of a nail biter. We had to wait a long time for the results, and then we had to wait another 2 weeks for the ranked choice results. And so it's been quite a ride for sure. It's an adjustment to what I'm used to. But I think I bring something to the table that a lot of people don't bring. I love listening to Representative Carpenter. I learn a lot about the permanent fund and the bigger fiscal issues. But I think, I look at myself as a citizen legislator here. I'm 6 months out from being a constituent writing emails to people. And so they've plopped me down in the middle of this madness, and we're trying to make some sense of it. So I feel a lot of responsibility to hold people accountable to what they're supposed to be doing, to their budgets. And so finance ended up being, even though that's not what I intended to do when I was here, it ended up being a really good fit for me.
Right.
I'm not a legislator that likes to throw a lot of bills out there. I'm not looking to justify my presence here by putting in 30 bills and getting 10 passed. Because what I found when I was a constituent, I didn't really care about the 5,000 bills they passed, because most of it was not anything that affected my life. It was naming bridges and, whatever. I feel like I'm here to help the departments be more efficient and to accomplish the mission that they have. So that's how I approach the subcommittees.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's like whatever Mark Twain said, the only time he was nervous is when the legislature was in session, because they're making all those bills, right, and everything else. You make an interesting comment. I mean, coming from the private sector and, kind of that high level position of management where you were understood hiring, firing, and motivation and goals, and I'm assuming budgets for these businesses and everything else. I'm reminded because I've already heard this refrain a couple times so far this session, which is, well, you can't, I know that you balance your household budget, but you just can't equate that. I know you balance your business budget. You just can't equate that to government because it's such a different, and I'm just like, arithmetic always wins, right? I mean, you can't argue with math. And so as much as you might want to say that government budgets are so different than private sector business budgets or household budgets, they're really not. It's income and outgo, and it's how do we make it more efficient, and what's our biggest costs, what's our biggest cost factor, and all. I mean, so when you look at this and you see these things, going on, especially with your background, I mean, have you heard people say that to you, that when you've been like, this is common sense that, a budget does this, and they go, oh, well, that's not how government operates. I mean, have you, I'm sure you've heard this before.
Oh, for sure. I actually love seeing the reaction on people's faces when I say things that seem really simple to me, but they look mortified when I've said it. So the difference, and I've said this, the difference when you run a business and you start a program and you have a plan and it's not working, you shift pretty fast because there's no pot of money to keep that failure going. So there's not, oh, well, we'll just do this for 10 years, even though it's failing, and then go find another pot of money to keep it going. And so that's the difference, I think. Mentality, you're right, the numbers don't lie, but the mentality is that, well, there's always more money to take care of this program.
Right.
But I want results. And what I'm seeing in a lot of cases is that there's a lot of money being thrown and not a lot of results. And so that's kind of, that's what my questions were. If you watched any of the subcommittees, I'm looking at their personnel costs, their commodities costs, their travel costs, and the results of their department, and they're not matching up. So those were the kinds of questions that I also know I don't know a lot of things. So
Right.
I try to keep things in context.
Well, I imagine that kind of question makes some people very uncomfortable when you start asking some of those questions like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Yes.
Julie Coulombe is our guest, House Rep for District 11 down there in Anchorage, and she's on finance and some subcommittees. What brought her to my attention again was this deed subcommittee that was written about in the Alaska Beacon. And I don't have a lot of time here, so I'm just going to kind of set this up. Actually, before we jump into that, we'll set this up for the next segment. But Julie, the ideal here obviously is to get government to live within its means. And we as a state have not done that for over a decade. I mean, it's just, we had that big pot of money. Like you said, there's always some other pot of money. First, it was the SBR, then it was the CBR, then it was, pulling it from the dividend. Then it was, more dividends and other things. And I mean, we're to this point here where, there will be not enough money, especially, I don't know if the spring forecast came out yesterday. It should have, but I'm sure that it was not a rosy outlook for everything moving forward. We're looking at deeper deficits moving forward. And there comes a time when we just run out of money, right?
Yep. Right. Yeah. And, I tried to tell people, you're breaking up a little bit, so hopefully I didn't interrupt you, but I just tell people, if you want a new program, if you want to do something different, find it from somewhere else. It's not going to come from the sky. You have to shift resources. So that's kind of how I approached it. If you're really passionate about something, you need to shift your resources towards the things you think are important, not just look for a pot of money.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're coming up on the break, so we're going to go ahead and take that break, and we will return here in just a moment with Julie Coulombe. She's going to be our guest here moving forward. In the next segment, we're going to talk about her budget in the subcommittee for DEED and some of the other committees that she's working on. And we will continue with more. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio, back with Julie Coulombe right after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, in the break with Julie Coulombe right now, or Coulombe, sorry, right now, as we go through. So yeah, sorry about that. My internet it's been fine for 2 days, and then today it just occasionally just drops it right out. So I apologize for that. Julie, I gotta imagine that this was, especially coming from your background, now that I understand and know your background, this whole thing has got to have just been kind of shocking to see the attitude of people who are working in government. I mean, again, I'm sure they're great people. Don't get me wrong. It's an institutional thing. It's not an individual thing. It's an institutional thing. But I mean, it must have just been like flooring to see all this attitude of, oh, don't worry, more money will come somewhere. This is an important program.
Right. Well, I tell people, with the subcommittee, you have a deadline for amendments. I didn't get one amendment to decrease anything from anyone, both sides. Nobody made an amendment to decrease. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. I did get amendments for two of the committees to increase and to add funding to different programs, but or create new programs. And so I explained to people, those amendments got turned down in my subcommittee, and except for one. But it's because in my mind, we're operating the budget under priorities from prior legislators.
Right.
So maybe the priorities back then were these things, but what are our priorities and where are we putting our resources? It's not that we need to find the money, it's where are we putting our priorities. And that's, I have found, it seems to me that this seems to be a private sector thing, because when I ask departments and organizations about what their priorities are and where they're putting their money, they're like, well, we have to do, we have 12 priorities. I'm like, well, that's 12 priorities. That's a list.
12 priorities is not a priority. Yeah, it's a list. Right, exactly.
So,
it's a
I
list.
mean, when I was running a business, I had big pipe dreams about all the things I'd like to do, but you settle down into the top 2 things that need to be done. You put your resources there, you get those things accomplished, and then you move on to the next thing. So I think there's a lot that could be done in just shifting resources to what we think is important. I would say, there's some really big themes here in Juneau as far as priorities. I don't know if it's on a list anywhere, but I hear a lot about the family, supporting family. Even the governor had said, when he wants to be a pro-life state, that's making the state a place where it's easier to run or to have a family. So all those things around family, whether it's daycare, schools, or medical supports or whatever, education, those are big things. Nobody likes what's going on with the school districts. And so, if you look at that and you say, okay, well, here's all of our budgets, here's where all the money suck is. Maybe we need to shift some of that money over to what we think is important, and look at it. I look at it as a pie, and everybody has a slice of it. I'm not going to just go get another pie and just eat, I'll just go grab some from there. We have a finite amount of money. And so let's again, establish our priorities and then move our resources towards those things that we think are important.
I mean, this is what I've said for years, but I think in this problem, we have a problem in this state that basically we've misunderstood the difference between must-haves and nice-to-haves, what's constitutionally mandated and what should be done, and the things that would be nice to have. And instead of prioritizing the constitutional mandates, we put them in, but then we focus on all these other things that are nice to haves. And we got less than 30 seconds, but is that kind of been your reaction down there?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like no concept of how things affect the budget. It's just, I want this, and this is good. And to what Ben was talking about, growing the economy, some of that weight is falling on government because the economy's languishing so much.
Right. All right. Well, the ding means we got to jump back into it. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like and share, like and share, like and follow. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
That's right. We got a pinch of it somewhere around here. May have thrown it away at one point. It's less painful that way. If you're not thinking about it, it's less painful. The Michael Duke Show continues. Our guest this morning is House Rep from District 11 in Anchorage, Julie Coulombe. And we've been talking with her about her experiences as a brand spanking new legislator. and how that has felt, which I can't even imagine, is like dropping into the deep end of the pool, and I meant the cesspool, not the regular Olympic size pool. We're we're going to talk now though about what brought her to my attention most recently. This story in the Alaska Beacon, which says after years of contentious fights, Alaska state's budget is advancing smoothly in the House. And it goes on to talk about the various things that are going on, mostly because it's mostly, they say in the story, that it's proceeding smoothly because it's a flat budget, because nobody's trying to cut or nobody's trying to increase or blah, 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 blah. And then they get into this discussion about DEED, the Department of Education and Early Development, in the subcommittee, which is chaired by Julie, and the cuts that got in there. She cut some costs, $900 million for a department level project at one point. But what caught my eye was the discussion about the cut of $400,000 for 2 librarians in the state library in Juneau. And I quote from the paper, Coulombe says she likes libraries, but those positions have been vacant for years. And then blood started to shoot out of my eyes, because I was just, this is something that has been a pet peeve of mine for years. And I want Julie to give me some commentary on it. But we know from working with former Representative Tammy Wilson that usually in the state budget on a year-to-year basis, there are somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 funded but vacant positions in the state government. 2,000 to 3,000. In fact, I think the last number that Tammy gave me was something like 2,890 something positions. And as Julie said, some of these positions have been vacant for years. So the argument of, well, you can't cut that because we've still got to deliver the service. Well, if it's been unfilled for years, you're obviously delivering the service, but you're getting this money and they're treating it like a slush fund, because those monies stay in there. And if they don't get spent, they get returned to the coffer. So of course they're going to spend them. So they have these empty positions. So Julie, let's talk about this. I call them ghost positions, right? Funded, but not filled. How long, do you know how long those positions at the state librarian level had been there unfilled? Because you said they've been vacant for years. Do you happen to know how many years, just out of curiosity?
Well, I think the director said it was about 12 months on one, and it was indeterminate on the other one. And I found it interesting that this has been such a focus. It's $400,000 cut. It's not that big of a deal. So when I looked at it, we have a library in Juneau off the road system. It's costing the state $6.2 million outside of the building maintenance. They get a separate tranche for that. 26 librarians making over $100,000. So I'm looking at it, this budget keeps going up, and in the governor's budget, it had the increase. So it's not that I'm against libraries, but this needs, and I said in subcommittee, I would like to see the library shift to more online services to make this wonderful library more accessible to the rest of the state and not add more bodies. And if you have already 2 positions that are been empty this long, this is not that big of a cut.
Right.
They came back and said that they give grants to small libraries and that I'm taking money out of the grants to small libraries.
Yeah. Okay. So they've had unfilled positions that they've had money for, so then they could play Santa Claus with all these other places, and it's all good and fine and well. And maybe to you, in the biggest scheme of things, $400,000 is not much, but as Brian says in the chat room, $400,000, that's a big cut to somebody's slush fund, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Well, yeah, I have definitely gotten pushback. Which being a new legislator, I did not see that come. I didn't see it as a big cut or a substantial anything. I thought we're just going to make it more efficient. I know there's some vacancies there. I know they have 2 really wonderful online programs that I want them to grow. One is homework help online, and the OWL program. And I'm like, why not pursue that? It doesn't take personnel. You can do those within the existing personnel, and it doesn't increase your staff, which is expensive. So when they said that I was taking some kind of cut to the grants, I think it was Representative Ruffridge said, well, why wouldn't you just cut the the vacancies. Why would you take it from the library grants?
Right.
So this is the thinking, well, we're not going to cut personnel.
Well, I got some accounting questions at that point. If you're taking payroll lines and you're moving them over to budget grants and doing that kind of things behind the scenes, I mean, what? I mean,
Yeah.
I if I was doing that in business, I have to answer to higher ups to say,
Right.
why are you moving this payrolls money over here to some kind of fixed, cost? I mean, there's a lot of questions there. But like I said, 3,000 of these positions exist in the state at any given time. And many of them have been unfilled for years, months and years.
Well, I had known about that before I came to Juneau, and vacancy rate was a big deal in all my subcommittees. We all asked, what's your vacancy rate? So in the budget, they have like a vacancy factor that they take from their budget. It's usually around 5%. So they have their total budget, they take 5% to account for vacancies, and that's their budget. Well, most of these departments are in the double-digit vacancies. And so we're only withdrawing money for 5% when they might have 12 or 18% vacancy rate. So those are empty slots that are sitting there. Historically, Department of Public Safety has had a lot of issues with that. And so luckily I had a really good committee. We looked at a lot of that. I would say Commissioner Cockrell has really done a good job trying to account for those and not ask money when he has vacancies, and he uses it. I think he's really trying to turn that around. But in general, overall, the departments, most of them had a higher vacancy than what was accounted for. So that's something that all my subcommittees had that.
Well, and again, 400,000 for two positions. We know that that's both salaries and benefits. So, $130,000 in salaries and 70,000 in benefits is usually probably that's probably a good formula for government. But if you just said it was $100,000 per position and you've got 3,000 vacancies, and you could cut into half of those, I mean, it's 150 million. I mean, that's a lot of money. All of a sudden when you start talking about it, and that's money that's not being, it's being accounted for. But again, if they were using librarian salaries to pay grants, that's not a good and faithful use of the money. I mean, my question is, why don't we cut all the empty positions? If they need to fill a position, they come back and it comes back as part of the supplemental. I mean, we already do a supplemental budget. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we cutting all that money out in the front end, 150, 200, $300 million, and then say, well, if you need another employee and a good one shows up, it's in the supplemental, we're good to go. Why not do that?
Well, and I think that happened last year. I mean, I wasn't here, but they added a lot of state trooper positions last year that were unfunded. And they said, you have a high vacancy rate, use the money you have. And if you need money, come back and we'll fund those. Right. They did come back. I can't remember the number. It wasn't that many, but they had hired. So now you have somebody said, we've hired this many people. We need this amount of money. And so it matches up a lot better than, well, we're just going to give you enough for 15 positions. You might fill 5 and then the rest just sits there. We can't afford that kind of waste. We can't be sitting on $100 million and just not do anything with it. We're not in that position to do that.
No, I'm in the same position of running businesses that are, you run $1 million business and you look at that, you just don't arbitrarily throw stuff at a line that you think is, well, we might spend it one day or whatever, and we've got to spend it by the end of the year to justify it, so it's all okay. To me, that's the biggest difference between the public and the private sector. Mm-hmm. The public sector, and I was first exposed to this 30 years ago when I worked in automotive. I ran a parts warehouse, an automotive parts warehouse. And I remember walking into the DOT in Fairbanks at, in June the 10th or June the 12th. And the guy's like, oh yeah, come with me. And he says, break out your pad. I need 3 of these and 4 of these and 5 of these. I mean, it was, $10, $12, $15,000 order for stuff. This guy would normally only buy $500 or $600 a month of stuff. And it was because it was the end of the fiscal year and he had to spend all that money or he wasn't going to get it again the next year. Whereas the private sector would be like, oh, look, we can fold this back into, this is the profits or this is for investment for next year or whatever. That's the main difference, is that if they have the money, they're going to spend it. If you eliminate all those ghost positions and you say, if you need more people, come to us, we'll give you more money. That's a whole different scenario.
Right. Yeah. And, to Representative Carpenter's point before, you go to a subcommittee and you're being fed information that isn't very useful in the management of the department. They're giving you what they want to tell you, and you have to find the questions to ask to find the rest of the information. And so because this has been a thing, it's kind of a committee, a department run committee. I found out real quick that I was going to have to do my own homework. I was working all weekend, 12-hour days, just digging through numbers because nothing was coming easily. I had to go find it and request it and look at it. And so, I think I'm anxious to do things a little bit different next year with the subcommittees. I think there's a lot that we can do to make it more efficient and give us the answers we really need to know to make good decisions.
Well, having a department-run subcommittee is definitely a problem because it's very easy to get gaslit by, let's flood them with all this useless information that really tells them nothing about what we actually do or where the money actually goes, and then say, this is why we need more money. Yeah. And of course, not everybody has a background like you, so they may not understand it, so they can get bamboozled in that kind of thing. And that's been what's been going on for the last 30 years here in the state government. The people that just don't understand. And again, they buy into the mantra of, well, you can't treat this like a business. No, but it's a budget. There's an income and there's an outgo, and they've got to match up. If they don't, there's a problem, and you can't allow these spurious things to continue, these unfunded. And I'm picking on that one thing because it's something that I've talked about for years, and nobody has really brought it up. This is like one of the first times that it's been mentioned. That's like, I love what this department does, but these positions have been unfilled for years, and I'm not going to put $400,000 in there for that. It's shattering to think about the amount of money that could possibly come back into the state and fix some. You want a BSA increase? How are you going to pay for it? Well, let's just cut all these unfunded positions and look, all of a sudden you got enough money. If that's what you really want to do is for that, if that's, but nobody's talking about where is the money coming from for this or that, or the BSA increase or the defined benefits. Nobody's talking about where does the money come from. As you said earlier, they just all assume that there's going to be another bucket of gold at the end of the rainbow somewhere.
Well, yeah. Well, let's be frank. There is a bucket of gold. We got this monster, permanent fund account, and we got the ERA, and they know that, and so if it really gets tough, then you know what's going to happen. I'm not going to rehash what you and Representative Carpenter talked about, but I think I don't look at the permanent fund that way. But if you do look at it that way, that we need to put more money towards these state services, we'll just take it out of the accounts we have. There's no need to be efficient. It's just get more money. So, and there's some things that government needs to do. And there's a lot of things that government tries to fix that can't, and they just can't. And they usually make it worse. And so you have to divide what those things that we have to do roads. We have to do infrastructure. I get it. We have to fund the National Guard. There's certain things that I feel like should be priorities for the government because that's their role. But we're getting swamped by the social ills of Alaska. And I know a lot of people that have come to my office, they want to help, and they think they're trying to make a difference in what's happening. But really, to Ben's point, the economy the private sector it's languishing so bad that it's falling on government because they have the resources.
Right. Well, and that's what we've talked about in the past, again, with Senator Myers, is that there's this growing disconnect between the public and the private sector, between those. They're supposed to be conjoined and cohesive and supposed to work together symbiotically. And instead, because we don't have revenue coming directly from the people, because we've got separate pots of money, the government can grow at an exponential rate compared to and the private economy can languish. And the government, of course, to justify its existence, puts more regulations and oversight in the private economy, which just crushes it down more and more. And we've got this disconnect, and it's going to kill us if we don't pay attention to it. It's going to cost us in the long run. As you said, that corpus of that fund, I said it many years ago, it is way too juicy a cookie jar for them not to want to put their hands into, right? I said first they'll come for the ERA, and for right now the Constitution it protects the corpus, and then SB 26 came in and they started the POMV, and then I'm like, it's going to be, but that's the direction that we're going right now.
Right. And I think, I'm so grateful that my experience in the private sector, because there's so much freedom and creativity in the private sector, especially when you run a business. You get to if it's the businesses I ran are pretty nimble. You can adjust to what's going on. You have creative ideas. You learn how to make your metrics in creative ways. And this is what I find is just the structure is so rigid that trying to turn the ship is really, really hard. Right. It takes a long time. I don't know if I'm going to be here that long to do that, and I look at this, I only have 2 years. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years, if I'll get reelected or not. So I'm trying to make them count. And, and I certainly don't want to be here for the rest of, I don't want to be here 20 years.
Right. You're talking about fighting against the institutional bias, right? I mean, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way it's always done. Yep. This makes sense. And anybody who's throwing a spanner in the wrench is you're going to raise some ire there. That's for sure. Yeah. Julie Coulombe is our guest. Julie, can you stick with us here to the top of the hour? Are you good to go? Okay. So we're going to come back to her and we'll talk about her priorities, what she would like to see, what she's working on, and beyond deed and the ghost positions and everything else, which I would love to see some legislator just take that on big time. But we're going to continue with more here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Julie Coulombe, our guest. We return right after this.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show, because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to anyway. Julie, this thing, the whole ghost position thing is just, it is a microcosm of the bigger problem. And it is the prime example of the biggest problem here. And the reaction, I'm glad you told me about what they said about the grants, because that's obviously not in the news story. But this just shows the idea of, well, that's our money that we need to be able to spend how we want to spend it. Not that we may have needed the position, but we're obviously getting by. But we were going to take that money, which we told you was for one thing, and we're going to use it for something else. And as Ruffridge said, well, why don't you take it out of the grants fund instead of the employee fund? Well, but this is what they've been doing, and they've been getting away with it. And there's no accountability in the departments for making sure that monies are spent from the proper pots of money and everything else. It just encourages this kind of behavior. I mean, 3,000 positions. My mind is blown. You've got in a 26,000, 27,000 employee group, if you've got 3,000 unfilled positions and you're funding them, that's a problem.
Yeah, that's a problem. I think part of it, there's two issues that I've seen. So I've only been here 8 weeks, so take it for what it's worth. One is that a lot of legislators have a tough time wrapping their head around the budget. I tend to be a little bit of a workaholic. So I spend a lot of time teaching or learning about what's going on. So if they don't fully understand what's going on, it's hard to know what questions to ask. The other thing is that departments do have the freedom to move their money around between commodities and personal services. They have that freedom. So there's really no way to say, hey, you have to take this down out of this certain area. The only way that I have found to do that is maybe to deny a funding request for a specific thing. But they can still, if they get denied, and this is across the board, they can use their funds to meet whatever needs they have. That's just the way it is. I mean, it's just the way the departments are run. And so I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but I think one thing that I find useful is that I get to come back to these same committees next year and say, okay, well, you said this and you did this. And so what did you accomplish with the money you requested? Which I didn't have that I wasn't privy to a lot of that information this year. Although I did listen to a lot of subcommittees from last year. So I knew what the questions were last year. And so I knew kind of where to look and what were the issues, what were they asking about last year about the subcommittees. And so that's helpful. Again, most people aren't going to sit around and do that on a weekend. But I found it really helpful to give me some context to what they were coming in and asking for this year. So
I could just see Julie coming into the committee next year. You got some splaining to do. You got some splaining to do. I could see it.
Yeah.
I mean, but that's the kind of accountability that we need. And this is part of my problem again with the whole people talk about, term limits and bureaucracy. And I say, well, great, term limits are great. I love them. But you got the bureaucracy. And what you're talking about is the hoodwinking that the bureaucracy can do. The coming into the committees and gaslighting and doing this and obfuscating things and doing, not telling you that they promised the previous committee that they would do this with it and everything else. That's the problem. And we have grown such a dependency state in Alaska that the bureaucracies feel comfortable in doing that, just expanding. And it's terrifying to me that this is kind of where we're at right now.
And
right?
me as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, I think, some of the Department of Education budget, the reaction to that has been pretty interesting because I was getting messages that I had cut the READS Act funding. If anybody watched what I did or read the amendments, I did not cut the funding. I redirected it, which is what I do. So Deed wanted $385,000 to have a conference about the READS Act. $385,000 to get a 35-member panel to have everybody come for 2 days and talk about the READS Act. The READS Act isn't even implemented yet. What are we talking about? Even if you did it in the spring, there's nothing to talk about. The READS Act is going to take a couple years to see the needle move. And so I took that money and said, you guys come up, be creative, and do a cheaper conference. And I added 2 reading specialist positions because
with that money, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was, I mean, I guess that was really radical. I just didn't see. I'm like, no, you don't need a conference and you don't need a $900,000 data project.
Don't you know that this is the Alaska study industry, right? We're going to study the study to study the study that we studied before.
Oh, gosh.
I mean, how many libraries are full of studies that have been studied, every time? I mean, it's the typical Alaskan thing. Let's form another committee or a working group or something else that's going to cost us $500,000 to do something. It's frustrating. All right, hold the line. Julie Coulombe is our guest. We're going to jump back into it. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like and share the show. Let's do it. All right. Well, I guess when the horse is dead, you must dismount. So I'm going to get off my high horse on the whole ghost position thing. Although, like I said, Julie, I would love to see somebody take that up as a prime issue when you talk about cutting the budgets. That's an easy fix. Like I said, they can always come back and ask for it in a supplemental if they do fill a position. There's nothing saying they can't, and it would be an easy $200 or $300 million out of the budget. If you got, and I'm saying at $100,000 a year, we know that they cost more than that. If it's 200, you're making a lot more money. And again, you could put those back in. I'd love to see that. But I want to talk about what your priorities are. And you obviously are hip deep in the morass right now, trying to go through all this stuff. And you're going through it. What is your priorities this year? I mean, obviously working on finance and through the subcommittees and everything else. But let's talk about some of your priorities and goals as you go forward. And if there's any bills that you are going to put forward that deal with the budget, or if you're just going to be in committee, let's talk about your priorities.
Yeah, so my number one priority and as a finance member, my responsibility is the accountability of the spending. That is by far where most of my time is put. I have to do the homework to see what departments are doing. And to your point about the vacancy rate, that's an excellent point. That's something that I could definitely dig into. It's what I enjoy doing as well. But I think, as I said before, I'm looking at things where we're shifting resources out from things like maybe vacancy rates, maybe it's totally different departments, and moving it into what we think that can actually help Alaskans. I'm frustrated when I was a constituent that the things they're working on, it didn't really align up with what I needed. I need my roads to be plowed. I wanted my permanent fund. I wanted services to work, my utilities to work. And some of those things are just being broke down. So my goals are very pragmatic. And I think, there's some bills. I have some areas. Mental health is an area, a passion of mine, because my husband and I had adopted a foster son who has issues. And so we've had our own story with mental health and addiction with him. And so that's something that I really have a big heart for. We have talk about a treasure pot. We have a treasure called the Mental Health Trust. These people have $700 to $800 million plus land. And our mental health system is absolutely broken. We have a Department of Justice report. We're on the verge of having a lawsuit from the feds because we're not providing community-based services for our kids. There's no mental health treatment. So mental health is definitely something that is a passion of mine. And I would like to see those funds being used more effectively as well, and not for studies, because we know we're the top of the list for everything, for domestic abuse, sexual abuse, suicide, drug addiction, drug overdose. I don't need any more data. Like, we need to take action. And we've been at the top of the list for years. So that's something that's a priority of mine, as well as, what I'm doing in the finance subcommittee. But I think right now I bring something that seems to be unusual here, and that's coming from the private sector. So I want to use what I bring to the table as best I can to bring the budget in line. There's nothing that I cut in subcommittees going to balance the budget. I think it's more of just an attitude of, hey, I'm watching these numbers. I look at everything that they're requesting. And so that accountability, I think, if we can spread that through the finance committee, there's 4 freshmen on the finance committee. So you got a fresh look, and most of us are from the private sector. So that's going to be my main focus.
Well,
and I know we're kind of running out of time, but I just have to say, regarding the pay increases that came through last month. Can I just say something about that real quick?
I would love you to say something about that. I was a little floored. Talk about shocked. I was a little shocked this morning when I saw that.
Yeah. So absolutely not. I don't know what's going to happen. I think there's support for those pay increases on the Senate side. But as an individual, and I can only speak for myself, there is no way that I would ever accept that kind of pay increases, like $35,000. That being said, I do know that many of the freshmen have their young families, their kids are in the hall some way, and it's been pretty tough on them financially to maintain 2 homes with. So it's not that I think everybody's just greedy, the greed. I think there is some, in some cases, it's been a hardship for me personally, because my husband and we're through the family stage. We're okay whether I have this job or not. That's something that's why I look at it as it's called a public servant for a reason. And part of the public servant is that the pay is not great.
Right.
But we have per diem. I have enough money to manage, and I'm fine. But I do know that there are some legislators that it's been tough on them when their families, and I recognize that. But me personally, no, I do not.
Yeah, no, I understand that there should be a discussion about it because it hasn't been raised in 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. Although I look at the private sector also, and I don't see a bunch of races going on in the private sector in difficult situations either, right? On top of that. But what really floored me was the governor fired the remaining 3 commissioners on Tuesday afternoon, and Wednesday they have a new deal. And I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
And when you talk about per diem and everything else and the thing, I mean, now it's $133,000 if you take full per diem and your pay. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money for what is essentially a part-time job. Now, granted, these 4 months, it doesn't feel like a part-time job, but for the rest of the year, it's just a part-time job. And it is, it's a little shocking. I'm not against readdressing it. I am against just throwing all the money at it. And you're right. The pressure that was coming out of the Senate, and you could read between the lines on the news stories when they denied the first pay increase for the governor and the commissioners, you could see that it was like, if we don't get ours, nobody gets it. And that kind of attitude just chaps me personally.
Well, yeah, and especially for somebody who just came out, like I said, I'm 6 months away from being a constituent. When I saw stuff like that and I knew what families were going through out here in the real world and the private sector, it's insulting. And I just don't, sometimes I think they just don't understand how that looks, maybe because I don't know, we were a working family for a long time. And I made a lot less and with a lot harder work.
Yeah, I get that. I understand that totally. I mean, when a part-time legislator makes more than I would make in a year, that's a problem, right? When I'm supporting a family of 5 and everything else, again, it's frustrating. I appreciate you, and I would like to invite you to come back on the show again here in the future. And I have your number now, so I'm going to bug you. So just
no, anytime. This was great. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been great, and I'm willing to come back anytime.
All right, Julie Coulombe is our guest. Hold the line, Julie, for just 1 second. Folks, we're out of time. Tomorrow is Firearms Friday. Dr. John Lott joins us to talk about his latest works. And, of course, Willie Waffle with the entertainment review and everything else. It's tomorrow. Thanks for coming in and joining us. Be kind to one another. Love one another. Live well. The Michael Duke Show. We'll see you tomorrow. Well, you're getting a rousing chorus in the chat room. Everybody loved having you on. You're getting some good stuff out there. Yeah, Julie, I know you're super busy, and because people have been telling me, I talk to folks all the time, and they said, yeah, she's one of the hardest working people in the legislature for sure. But if you want to add to your workload with that vacancy ghost position thing, I mean, I think if more, here's the thing, the average person doesn't understand that. The average person doesn't understand that that's what's going on. And so if they understood that there was a 10, 15, 18% vacancy rate in these positions, and they're using that money for other things, I think most people would be shocked that that's what's going on. That there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in each of these departments, millions of dollars, I guess, if you fill up all the positions, where it's just being used at their discretion, and then they're cutting the PFD on top of that. I mean, that's a shocking thing. And I think it would be a good tool, and maybe it's something that we can shame these departments with to again work a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Yeah.
There was never anything like a vacancy rate factor or anything especially in a small business. Like, no, you get the money. Yeah. And actually when we had vacancies, it usually helped me make my labor costs for the month.
Down. Exactly. Yeah.
I didn't get those I didn't get those when there was nobody there.
Right. Right.
That's
I
another
know
thing.
exactly. It wasn't like I had a vacancy and I took that money and did something else with it. I bought another trip to a conference somewhere or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's frustrating. Let me give you the floor for the last minute here. Any final thoughts? I like to do this at the end so that there's no pressure to hit the top of the hour or anything. So your final thoughts, any final thoughts for the listeners and everybody else that's listening on the podcast and everything else. Julie Coulombe, you get the last word here.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, I think I want to end positively. I would say that the majority caucus is like there is a lot of great conservatives here. We're just trying to figure out what the best way to move forward is. I mean, Representative Carpenter is doing such great work in Ways and Means. And what it's doing is it's kind of like it's giving us a vision to move towards. And so everybody has their role, whether it's policy or finance or budget or whatever. We're all moving towards a goal. And so I think people should feel good that, it's messy right now, but we're moving towards a good fiscal plan. I feel really, really good about that. And I think Ben's gonna really solidify that this year, try to work on settling the permanent fund. And then there's the new people on finance, man, we're working hard. We're really trying to hold the departments accountable and make sure they have the funding for the things they need and take away what we deem not important. So I just want people to feel good about that. The majority is really working hard in the House.
Right.
We got a good group of conservatives here and we work well together. So that should feel hopeful, especially with the past legislatures.
Well, it is good because I think the listeners have come to the conclusion, grudgingly and with great consternation, that up until now, there has just not been the political will to cut into the budget to the point that we need. And we've been crying about cuts on this program for 20 years. I've always said what we have in this state is a spending problem, not a revenue problem, but they've had the spending problem so long that now it's become both a spending and a revenue problem, right? I mean, that's the thing. And you were talking about, changing the habits and changing the mindset of people. And that's something that needs to happen. We need to develop enough political will to cut into the budget. And I'm hoping that the new batch of freshmen and folks like you will kind of turn that tide. We're not going to cut our way to success right now because of the amount of deficit. But my God, if it's a $600 million deficit and we can cut $400 million out, it sure does make the job a lot easier in the long run.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
and it's usually, except for your vacancy rate idea, it's usually not a big 100 million. You're cutting $400,000, $1 million, $2 million at a time. And it takes persistence. It takes homework. And, you have to look at it like like running a business to make sure everything is as efficient as possible. So
you should look at other states and find out if other states carry the same kind of vacancy rate ploy that we're doing here, that they're allowing that. That would be an interesting comparative just to see, because it just boggles my mind, the amount of money that's wasted in those kind of efforts. All right. Well, Julie, again, you got lots of kudos from the chat room this morning, and we appreciate you coming on, and we'll talk to you again maybe in a couple weeks. Okay.
All right. That'd be great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I appreciate you being part of it today. Thanks for coming on and joining us and taking the time. We really appreciate it. Julie Coulombe, our guest here on the Michael Duke Show. All right. Well, that means we're done for today. We're done. I'm headed up to Fairbanks. We're going to be doing the Open North American Championships on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I'll be broadcasting from Fairbanks tomorrow. And we're just going to have a great time. So thanks for coming in. Thanks for being part of it. Remember, again, be kind, love one another, live well. If you like the show, don't forget you can support it by checking out the Common Sense Corps on Patreon, patreon.com/Michael Duke Show, or going to the Michael Duke Show website and clicking on Join the Corps. All right, my friends, out of time. We will see you tomorrow. Ghost positions. Man, just think about that. $300-400 million. Oof.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.